We want to begin with two major rulings from the Supreme Court today regarding President Trump's taxes and financial reports. In a 7-2 decision, the court said Manhattan's chief prosecutor, Cyrus Vance, can obtain the president's business records and tax returns. A second ruling blocked Congress from seeing his financial records, sending it to lower courts. Skylar Henry has details on the Supreme Court's rulings.
President Trump's years-long battle to keep his financial records secret culminated in today's Supreme Court ruling. In two separate opinions, with the justices splitting 7-2, the court ruled the president can block the release of his records to Congress, returning the case to the lower courts. But the High Court upheld New York prosecutors' demand for the president's tax returns, which Mr. Trump had been fighting.
We're fighting all the subpoenas. Look, these aren't like impartial people.
Three committees in the Democratic-controlled House and New York prosecutors demanded the president hand over his tax returns, along with other personal financial information. The court heard more than 3 hours of arguments in May.
There is a long, long history of Congress seeking records and getting them.
At some point, there's a straw that breaks the camel's back.
President Trump's lawyers called the subpoenas overreach, arguing the president is immune from criminal prosecution while he's in office.
The presidency is being harassed.
The Manhattan District Attorney's Office had subpoenaed 8 years of President Trump's personal and corporate tax returns as part of its investigation into hush money payments made to two women during the 2016 presidential campaign. In both opinions, President Trump's appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, joined the majority. Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissented. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington.
And for more on this, I want to bring in Ilya Shapiro. He's the director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. Welcome, Ilya. Great to have you with us. So talk to us about the decisions in these cases. Were they what was expected?
I think they were. It's kind of a split decision in the sense that you can broadly characterize the one involving the grand jury state subpoena as a loss for the president and the one involving the congressional subpoenas as a win for the president. But there's nothing immediate that's going to happen as a result. And so this all now goes back to the lower courts, and I don't think we'll know before the election. We certainly won't see the president's tax returns before the election.
So there's no sort of immediate exposure for the president, but Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance did release the statement saying this is a tremendous victory for our nation's system of justice and its founding principle that no one, not even a president, is above the law. So he sounds pretty confident that he will eventually get those records. What is going to happen now that a path has apparently been cleared for Manhattan's chief prosecutor?
Yeah, I think the court did a very good job of balancing the institutional concerns, both the state versus federal governments and the executive versus the legislative branches. So obviously, if you win a case, you're going to crow about it, and the DA is a political position, so he's going to make hay with that. He now is going back to the lower courts, and presumably the president's lawyers will throw up some other kinds of objections, although he's not seeking records relating to his presidential function. So executive privilege shouldn't be an issue. Probably the president eventually loses that and the grand jury gets to see the materials, but not until after the election, probably. And so if Donald Trump isn't, his legal troubles will certainly continue whether he's reelected or not. In the other case, which was much broader, the congressional subpoenas, here the court equally with the 7-2 vote said that the lower courts just did not consider the very serious separation of powers issues. Congress did not do a good enough job of lawyering up the specific issues it wanted to see and how that was related to a legitimate legislative or oversight purpose. But that, if Donald Trump is not reelected, then that presumably goes away because there's nothing more for Congress to investigate.
Right. Okay. So now that the Supreme Court has sort of punted that down to a lower court, what's likely to happen there?
Well, there are going to be arguments about, with the absolute immunity stripped away in the New York State court, the president will probably make arguments that it would be inconvenient for him or taxing on his constitutional responsibilities to be forced to deal with his lawyers and accountants in regarding the consequences of these materials. We'll see how the court rules, but as I said, it's not an immediate thing, and so there were some outlets I think that were reporting that now absolutely we're going to get to see president's tax returns. Not so fast. We probably will, but as I said, it'll take some time.
Right, and probably not before the election. All right, so Ilya, a CBS News poll from last month did find, not surprisingly, that the public is divided along partisan lines over whether it's necessary for President Trump to release his tax returns. So we have an idea of how the public feels, but legally, how could these rulings impact the president?
Well, there is no legal requirement that a candidate for president, let alone a president, release his tax returns. States over time have tried to add various requirements for presidential candidates to appear on their ballot, and courts have struck that down because the Constitution specifies eligibility requirements to run for president. You have to be 35, you have to be a natural-born citizen, and that's it. And so I don't think if a state wanted to add the requirement you have to release your tax returns, I don't think that would hold up in court. It's been a norm, at least for modern candidates, but legally speaking, absent, again, some sort of criminal investigation like this is, there's not going to be a legal rule that all candidates have to disclose.
All right, Ilya Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight.
My pleasure.